The show you're about to hear discusses films, books, and TV shows in their entirety, twists, endings, and all, without fear of spoilers. So if you don't want to know who dies, who done it, or how it all ends, we strongly advise you switch off now. Hello, I'm Paul Tyler, and welcome to Spoiler, the show which reviews movies, books and TV shows in their entirety. This week we're reading R J Palacio's 2012 children's novel, Wonder. And just another final warning, we will be talking about the whole of the book. We will ruin it for you. So if you've not already read Wonder, go away, read it now, then come back to us afterwards. They're gone. Right, on with the show. For R J Palacio, queuing for an ice cream turned out to be an inspirational lightning bolt.
I was with my kids, and we were sitting outside of an ice cream store, and my older son had gone inside to get us some chocolate shakes, and I realized at a certain point that I was sitting right next to a little girl who looked exactly the way I described Augie as looking. And I kind of panicked, I admit, not because of the little girl, but because I knew that the moment my younger son looked up and saw her that he would say or do something that would, hurt her feelings or something.
She moved him away, an act that might be considered her trying not to cause any embarrassment, as young children naturally point out things or people that are different, something any of us might instinctively do. It ended up making the situation worse.
It didn't play out well. Everything that I kind of was afraid would happen did happen.
If I found a magic lamp and I could have one wish, I would wish that I had a normal face, that no one ever noticed at all.
Wonder tells the story of 10-year-old August Pullman, Augie to his friends, as he adapts from being homeschooled to starting Beecher Prep Middle School. Augie hasn't been to school because of the many operations he's had to endure due to being born with facial deformity.
I won't describe what I look like. Whatever you're thinking is probably worse.
The book is told not only from Augie's perspective, but also from his best friend at the school, Jack Will. His sister Via gets her say, as does her boyfriend Justin and her friend Miranda.
Doctors have come from distant cities just to see me.
Natalie Merchant's song Wonder is quoted at the very beginning of the novel, and this was also an inspiration for Palacio to create a book aimed at a reading age of 9 to 11 to help society see beyond disability. In creating the character of Augie Pullman, it appears she may have done just that, with millions of copies being sold around the world and a film adaptation starring Julia Roberts, Owen Wilson and spoiler favourite Jacob Tremblay.
My name is Augie Pullman.
If they stare, let them stare.
You're the toughest kid in that school.
Writing in The Telegraph, Martin Chilton believes that Wonder will delight children and adults because it's a terrific story, and Palacio is exploring some fundamental truths about how humans behave and how they should behave. That's The Telegraph.
Cool beans.
Tellingly, Maria Russo in the New York Times was left puzzled as to why her 9-year-old daughter remained dry-eyed when she was sobbing throughout the book. "I like kids who are different," came the perfect reply.
What a marvelous line, isn't it?
So perfect, in fact, it makes you wonder if Wonder should be moved permanently from the young readers area of the bookshop to the adult section to ensure the right generation learn important lessons about their perceptions of people who may appear different. And the story of how Wonder came to be also tells us that when the kids ask for an ice cream, it might be worthwhile to say yes.
Shall we make a new rule of life? Always to try to be a little kinder than is necessary.
Later in the show, we'll be taking a look at the practice of repackaging books following the release of a movie adaptation. But first, joining me here to wonder about Wonder are the wonderful Andy Goulding and Rachael Burnett.
Hello!
Who are both British Podcast Award nominated, as am I. However, they are not Audio Production Award nominated, and neither am I. But we do know a man who is, though. And it's Johnny Hoare, our producer. So, I mean, we do provide the I mean, I'm looking forward to this. When we're going to go to an awards evening, and I'm looking forward to telling all the producers there that they wouldn't be anything without the talent, you know, and everything. Because, you know,
that'll go down well.
I'm really looking forward to that evening. But it is a huge and fantastic achievement for Johnny to be nominated. So we have some special effects, and here we go in the best producer category, Johnny Hoare.
Yay!
Hello. Thank you. Oh, I love the smell of those after they've gone off. Right.
To listeners, that's just going to sound like you're shouting.
Okay, well, so it is, and I'm going to go there, and I'm going to pretend I'm Johnny Hall, only if we win, though. Right, so there we go. So, right, enough of that nonsense. Back to wonder. Let's start with Andy. Andy, would you normally read fiction aimed at a much lower age than you are? I mean, bearing in mind, I wrote this question down and I pressed delete on my, I was going to say typewriter, computer, and I was going to say, given that your favourite film is Dumbo, but when I wrote that, it just sounded cruel. But actually, as I'm sat here in front of you, it sounds okay, so I'm going to say it.
That's fine by me.
I thought it would be.
And yeah, I would. I mean, I love reading things and watching things that are aimed at all sorts of ages, and I think a good critic can judge them based on both how they play to an audience that they're aimed at, and also how they play to a grown audience. And I think this book has been thoroughly judged in both cases, hasn't it? And I think I would have loved it as a kid, but as an adult, I absolutely adore it. I thought it was just beautiful. I really did. When I started reading it, I mean, I'm sure it does this to a lot of people. It brings up a memory that's kind of related to it from your own life. And I remembered when I was very young, probably only about 6 or 7, and I was at an event at a local pub near where I lived, and there was a group of people came in. Looking back on it, I think they had Down syndrome. At that age, I hadn't encountered anything like that before, and I was slightly scared of them. And I looked to some of the adults around me, and the adults who were there at the time kind of closed around me a bit and became ultra protective, and someone actually said, stay away from them. And that's the sort of moment that can really, I think, plant serious seeds of prejudice. Luckily for me, I have extremely liberal parents, and so my reaction to it was instantly kind of to know that was wrong, and I felt more strange about the fear that I had felt than I didn't feel like I had to stay away from them. But for children who may have been in that situation and just kind of gone along with having been misadvised to just respect your elders and just go along with everything they say, that's the sort of thing that needs nipping in the bud, and books like this are really crucial in doing that. And I think they have to be very skillfully written, because if you preach outright to kids, then usually they don't want to know. But this gets into the experience. And I think R J Palacio, you can tell, really understands children from the point of view of having been one, but also from having children. And all that feeds into it. And I just think this is a book that all kids should read, because it really, if they've encountered something like this, it will make them rethink it. If they haven't, then if they do, it will prepare them for it. So I think it's a modern masterpiece, and I've been immersed in its world for like the last sort of few weeks, and I've loved every minute of it.
Okay, Rachael, I'm going to throw it open to you. I wonder where this is going to go. Firstly, who brought this in?
It was Rachael.
Your choice. So, are you embarrassed by bringing this choice in?
Not at all.
Of course you're not.
Not at all. It does my heart so much good to hear you talk about it with such affection. It's a book that I read because I'm not at all afraid of reading children's books. I was a children's bookseller for quite a few years, and I think there's a lot of really good stuff in children's writing, better than adult a lot of the time. This particular one I remember reading, I think on the recommendation of a friend of mine, and I think I read it in one go. I just thought it was amazing. And I was slightly dubious about bringing a children's book into the spoiler studio and saying, let's read this. But I had faith in it.
Was that because of me?
No.
That means yes.
And also because it's been so popular, and I know you're against things that are a little bit popular, good reviews.
or any kind of recommendation.
Well, yes, indeed. It's that whole room thing. When I was dubious about like Room, and when you said that you liked it, I was like, oh, it's like you've said that you like my son. And it is a bit like that again.
Oh, no.
I was going to say doesn't like it. But as long as Andy likes it, that's kind of okay. But I still really love it. And I think the importance of it, and it's not just the importance for children who may not have seen disability before or facial deformity or whatever, but also from the point of view of anyone who feels like they look different or they feel odd or whatever. I think there's this amazing YouTube video, and it's just a lot of children with Treacher-Collins syndrome, which is what Augie has, basically saying, I am Augie Pullman. I am Augie Pullman. And the empowerment and the strength that they take from having that popular figure in fiction who is well liked and, that's like them, that's okay. And you just think, that's really fantastic. And a book's done that. That's really fantastic. They totally get Augie. So it's a really important book, and I'm really glad that you connected with it in that way. That's really cool.
Okay, the observant members of the studio. Now, I brought out my mobile phone, my cell phone.
Mobile?
My mobile phone. And what I'm going to do if you play out is, regular listeners to Spoiler will know, and why wouldn't you be? A regular listener to Spoiler will know that I don't read books. I do read books. I've had a Springsteen autobiography on the go since last Christmas. I do, however, listen to audiobooks, and I listen to a lot of podcasts, as well as making them. But what I want to do for you now is play something. I've brought my mobile phone out. If this doesn't work, Johnny, I'm sure you'll be able to splice something in. But this is this is actually authentic. So I want you to wonder if you are going to be able to listen to this voice, which is a grown woman do an impression of a 10-year-old boy for 8 hours. Let's,
Sure, I do ordinary things. I eat ice cream. I ride my bike. I play ball. I have an Xbox. Stuff like that makes me ordinary, I guess. And I feel ordinary inside. But I know ordinary kids don't make other ordinary kids run away screaming.
So there we go. That'll do for now. Right. So, just give me your viewpoint on that voice.
Can I say
the opening line? Could you give me? Come on.
This is really interesting. We actually looked up, didn't we, before we came out tonight? We looked up the audio version because we wanted to hear what you had listened to, and we both commented on the fact that the voice was going to be really vital. And all we could find was the one where there was a woman doing Augie's voice, and I think neither of us thought that was a particularly good idea. And personally, I couldn't listen to that. That's why I read, because Augie has a voice in my head, and it isn't that. It really isn't that.
No, exactly. So I should have read, shouldn't I?
You really should.
I really should have read. However, if there's one thing that we learn in this book, it's the importance of a very good teacher. And YouTube, as we now know, is a wonderful, wonderful place. And it not only teaches me how to unblock a toilet, hot water from the kettle and soapy water, Andy, just in case you...
Brilliant.
Okay,
Thanks.
just
take that one home.
No, I know. Podcast that keeps on giving. And I discovered someone called Mrs. Powers. Mrs. Powers likes to read. Would appear. I mean, I don't know. There's not much history on it. There's no biog there. It doesn't link to a Twitter account. Do you know what? She's just doing this for the love of it, and she's sticking it. I'm assuming she's a primary school teacher in America, which might well be middle school. Who knows what their system's like. But there's no real editing here. You know, she fluffs a line. It doesn't matter, or a word, or this kind of thing. But do you know what? The power of this story, guess what? Guess what? If you were stuck in traffic, and let's be quite specific here. I like specifics. If you were stuck in traffic on Skellingthorpe Road in Lincoln, or, in I don't know, let's say October, November at some point, autumn time, in 2017, and you saw a man walking a dog and sometimes punching the air, that'll be when Jack Wills punched Julian. If you were walking around a nature reserve in the south end of Lincoln and you saw a man who looked like he might have been, let's go for it, crying, that'll be when, unfortunately, hey, this is spoiler, the dog passes away, right? So when Daisy the dog passes away, that'll be that. There was also the occasion of when Augie left his toy at home for his mum to cuddle, and here we go, Rachel's filling up now. I'm not far from it. While he goes away off to that nature reserve. And there was some peculiar serendipities in this for me, particularly actually because of the dog thing. Particularly, just because of that moment of him leaving the toy behind and my own children growing up, and particularly of him going to a nature reserve and I was walking through a nature reserve. I mean, these are coincidences I'll give you, but sometimes when you're reading something or listening to something with such obvious, brilliant writing, that it makes such a connection with you, then, you start to feel and see, and, it becomes much more than just a book, something we're reviewing for the program. And it's become a way of life over the last time. It's one of these situations. Back in the reading room days, I used to talk about books when I would delay the ending. So I would only read a couple of pages at a time because I'm enjoying it so much and you don't want it to end. And I think we must have discussed in here that I do have a theory that when people are upset about long-running series ending, they're not upsetting about the ending. They're not upset, because the ending wasn't very good. The ending wasn't very good. It's not that. It's that they're going to miss the characters. And I think we've established that before. And I'm sure we'll get to the fact that there's other books available now and spin-offs and things like that, and hopefully there'll be more soon as well. But when this book ends, it's like, oh, well, what, nothing can replace that. Nothing can replace it. So well done, Rach.
Thanks. I'm just so glad that I brought this to the table. This is great. I was slightly dubious when you played me that audio. I thought, oh no, you didn't even listen to it.
that was the way I set it up.
For Mrs. Powers.
The last hour of my life has been trying to set up that moment. Trying to be coy.
It was very coy. You had me completely fooled. I was thinking, oh no, he hated it. Because of the voice.
I think it worked. Let's talk about Mr. Brown, shall we? Mr. Brown. Have you ever heard the word precepts before?
No, it was a new one on me, actually. Yeah.
No, never.
But what a great idea.
It's a fantastic idea. There is a little book, 365 Precepts, Mr. Brown's, which I'd love to get a hold of.
365 Days of Wonder, isn't it? Yeah. I think a very key point for me early on, and I wouldn't say a turning point, because there was no way to be turned. Actually, coincidentally, what I must say actually, is that the reading that I had from YouTube, Mrs. Powers, it stopped at page 284, which is like part 19. Just at the point where the voice comes back to Augie, because as we said in the introduction, the voices are different here, and I didn't really experiment with any of the other ones from the official audiobook, and until it got to that point. Then I thought, I'm going to have to put the audiobook back on. And at first, it bothered me, obviously. I was conscious of it. I was thinking of it. I'd made that change. However, again, by that time, I was so deep into the story that it didn't matter. So, this is a recommendation. If you're like me, fool, or you need a different version of an audiobook, then do seek one out if that's necessary, or you might be more tolerant than some. And hey, if this book's supposed to teach you anything, it's tolerance.
It's very true.
Honestly.
Yeah, there was a review of the audiobook. So when I heard that it was, I thought, oh no, he's not going to listen to it. Like you didn't.
Yeah.
And and I thought, oh, I'll have a look. And somebody had reviewed it, and they said it took her a while, but she did get used to it. So, but there wasn't a single person that went, oh yeah, I really like the voice from the start. Nobody said that. Everyone said it's a voice they had to get used to.
Yeah. I mean, I think kindness.
Yeah.
I think we're going to use that word in a little bit in this review, and to ensure we're being kind, I think perhaps the actor did their best job. It was just a strange decision to do that. I think when there are obviously so many gifted child actors out there who can, who'd be able to pull this off, no problem. I could find you 3 just thinking about it.
But also, I think it does have a slow build. So maybe it was like it got into like later in the book, you would have come around to that, because I know when I started reading it, it took me a while to think, why is this so highly regarded? I'm not sure. And as I'd read a few of the chapters, I was thinking, where is this going? And am I gonna relate to it enough? And then as soon as he got into school, that was when it really hit me. And the plethora of emotions, because it would have been a bad writer, probably would have had him go to school and have a really bad experience, feel terrible going. But the plethora of emotions that first day at school bit taps into is just incredible. And that night I put the book down and went to sleep and dreamed that I was back on my first day at school in 1993. But again, it wasn't one of those, you have those weird ones where you can't find the classroom and then you realise you're naked. It wasn't one of those. It was like reliving that first day at school with all the different emotions. So those moments where you're in a class and you think, oh, I'm going to like this. And then later on, like maybe you meet someone who's not very nice to you and you feel a bit sad. And it is those ups and downs, isn't it? And I think that's really, really crucial. And I think R J Palacio's writing never depicts Oggy as the victim, and he never depicts himself as that either. It's like when people hear about people who suffer from depression and think they're miserable all the time, and it's far more complex than that, and it's ups and downs, and that it felt like that to me. It really gets into that richness of all the emotions. Yeah,
no, it definitely does. I think it'd been very easy to just paint it with very broad strokes.
Yeah.
But she absolutely doesn't do that. And there's so many points where when you're with Augie, and that was always my favourite bit, whenever there was an Augie chapter, that was always my favourite bit. And he's funny and he's smart and he's got so much about him. And the face is just one very small element, actually, of who he is. And he doesn't think about it all the time. That's a really important thing. It's not an all-encompassing thing that everything is directed around that. And the way his friends react, it isn't black and white. It's not like everyone goes, some people are a little bit funny about it. Some people are really weird about it. There's so many different reactions, which there would be. It is, as you say, I think you use the word rich, and I think that's perfect description.
As we're talking quite early on at the moment, one of the subtleties of the writing was when the parents obviously disagreed about him going to school, and then it seemed like they'd flipped their decisions, or the mum obviously got very nervous about him going to school and this kind of thing, because it's the right thing, but it's going to be challenging, and particularly challenging for the parents. But just that subtlety that you sort of recognise, and it hits out. It's like I don't necessarily even think that's. I initially thought that might be something for the adults. Oh, there's one for the adults. Throw something in there, but actually no, because the kids recognise these things, don't they? They understand. They're smarter than we ever think they are, which is a shame. But it just, I just thought that again at that point that was a trigger for me that said, yeah, we're onto something here. This is, this is right. But Mr. Brown's precepts. I was going to say, when given the choice between being right or being kind, choose kind, which is a quote from Mr. Wayne Dyer. And again, early on, that smacks you in the mouth. So this is it. Yeah. And the importance of a good teacher, and obviously a good headmaster there as well. Mr. Tushman.
Great name.
I giggled. I'm assuming you did.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, apparently R J Palacio actually did have a teacher called Mr. Butt.
Really?
Yeah, and that's where it came from.
Excellent.
Well, it's funny, isn't it?
It is funny. Absolutely.
Well, I kind of like that there's that bit at the beginning where they laugh and they kind of make fun of his name. And that kind of immediately chimed with me in that Oggy is made fun of, but he's not above doing it a bit himself. But the way they do it in that kind of way that no one's ever going to find out, and it's just sort of gentle, and whereas like Julian does it to his face, and so there's those levels, and you think it's not particularly nice to make fun of someone's name, but they're not doing it in a cruel way. It's those kind of layers, isn't it? Yeah,
it's those things that children will read and pick up without even really realising. Yeah. It's okay to have a gentle rib, but if it's hurtful, then you don't. Yeah. Always be kind, be kinder than necessary is another thing they say at some point. And I love that idea. Don't just be as kind as it needs to be even kinder than that. Yeah. And I just love that idea, and kids will pick up on that.
One thing I really liked about Mr. Tushman as well is that, as with a lot of the characters in this, is that he is obviously a good character and an inspiring character, but he's not without his flaws. I certainly felt there were some moments where the special interest that he takes in Oggy, maybe he makes some strange decisions that tip over into maybe a little bit of favouritism. Certainly at the end, when he takes the picture that Oggy drew and he puts it up in the wall in his office, that seemed like a wrong decision to me to do, because every kid who goes in there is going to see that he's kind of singled out his special interest in one kid in the school by taking a picture that he did and putting it up. And I think that's in there on purpose. I think it does show that he's taken such a special interest. He's formed this bond that's beyond what he normally forms with other students.
Well, that's true. But I think he shows a strength of character in the email section, where is it an email or letter section to Julian's mum, where he writes and sort of defends. And it's a complicated situation where Jack has obviously punched Julian, and Julian's mum doesn't believe that Augie should be at that school, because she believes he would have special needs, but obviously he doesn't. There's nothing else required there for him, and. So, well, I wouldn't even say it was that subtle. It was should we say it was subtle as a brick when he replied?
It was great,
but it was polite, wasn't it?
It was ever professional.
Yeah, ever professional. Yeah. And again, that's another moment I punched the air.
Yeah, he's a great headmaster.
So, as you said earlier, Rachel, you enjoyed Augie's bits the best. So when it first pulls away from Augie's narrative. Where does he go to? Who does it go to next? Is it Jack? Is it
Via?
Oh, of course, Via, his sister.
Which makes sense. I think,
How did you? Firstly, how did you feel about that? And did you think, what's going on here?
It's hard for me to remember, because obviously this is the second time I've read it. But I can imagine that it was probably quite jarring because I didn't expect it. It's so very strongly his voice, and all of a sudden it's a different voice.
Yeah.
But it's somebody very close to him, so you're only just a little step away from Augie at that point. And I've always been fascinated with the effect on the siblings of children who have a lot of attention on them, necessarily and quite rightly.
Yeah.
Augie's had 27 operations, and that necessitates that his sister will get, she will be put second a lot. And that's very, very tough for any child to accept that they are second, no matter how much they understand that, of course, Augie has to be put first because he's in pain and he's been in hospital. And of course, that's absolutely right. And she's wonderful and she does get it. But she is a child and she wants to be first as well. And I thought that came across so strongly. It's such an important voice to hear because they're so often forgotten, so often neglected. And they're doing this wonderful, strong thing that nobody really thinks about. Yes, Augie's being very strong and he's strong every day and that's amazing and we love him for that. However, she's got an incredible strength as well because of course she does. She will demand some attention, but she very rarely does it. And she loves Augie to pieces. And that family is so strong. And I love that about this book is that the family is so tight and there's so much support. But the whole story, when she was talking about her gran, the heartbreak that you feel for her, that she's got this one person in the family who has said to her, Augie, he has his angels. You're my first. You're my number one. And then that person goes and you just think, I can't bear this. Now that person's gone. Who has she got?
And that was the first time, sorry to interrupt, but that was the first time that I cried. And I can picture it now. I was in my kitchen cooking.
Oh, it's just heartbreaking.
It's funny as you say that now. I'm just like, that's come back.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. These points really hit you because you feel them so deeply. You know what it's like to lose a grandparent, especially if they're really well loved. I was very, very close to my grandma. I always felt like it was something special between she and I. And when she died, I was really angry with her. I remember being quite angry and it's like, but you're the one that put me first quite a lot. And now so there was a real affinity between me and Via at that point. But I also have a friend who has two daughters, one who's severely disabled and one who isn't. And I've seen them grow up and how that's affected the sibling. It's a really complex thing. And it's good that she brought that voice in because Via could have been sidelined and she really shouldn't have been sidelined because it's a very important voice.
I mean, like you say, used the word jar there at first, but it was only it's a jar lid, if you like.
Yeah.
And some particularly tasty chutney. And,
yes.
But it moved the narrative along.
Oh, totally did.
So it's like, right, okay, so we're carrying on with the story, but it's from someone else's perspective and a really, really important one. And then it moved on to other characters as well. How did you feel about that, Andy?
I really liked it. When I first realised that was going to happen, I thought, this is really interesting. It'll give us some different perspective. At that point, I thought it was just going to be Augie and Via, whose voices we were going to hear. And then it went to another character. I can't remember who it switches to next.
Is it Jack next?
It might be.
I think it's Jack.
It might be Jack next, yeah. And then I realised that we were going to dot around all the characters, and then that was when I really thought, right, this is something special because we're getting such a wide idea of all the views, and it's not. When I came to read this, I thought, right, it could be addressed in a very kind of maudlin way. It could be very heavy, but it broadens the scope of what it looks at because it looks at not only people with facial differences, but also the people in their world and how it affects them. That's something that a lot of things would overlook. You could write it just from one point of view and make out that anyone who reacts with surprise or horror or anything is just wrong and bad. And to oversimplify it that much doesn't get under the skin of the themes. So I was really happy to see that she was doing all these different voices. And I think she's really good at writing different voices. As you said, Rachel, Via has a very similar voice to Augie, but there's subtle differences. Like her chapters are just ever so slightly longer, and she's got sort of a slightly better vocabulary being that little bit older. And then she's shifting to some of these other characters. So when it comes to Justin, for instance, and everything is written in lowercase. Paul, you wouldn't have seen this having listened to it, but for Justin's chapters, everything's written in lowercase. Was there punctuation? I think
hardly any.
There was very little punctuation, so it was just like a sort of stream of consciousness thing, and it kind of felt like it gave him this sort of slight hint of youthful pretentiousness, like he thought it was E. Cummings or something, and it just it really gave it a feel that I don't think it would be captured listening to it, because on the page with all the pictures as well, you got a little picture, and I assume this is in all editions. Each chapter starts with a picture of the face of the person who's talking, but the face is, you don't see any features, you just see an eye. And that was really good for me, because it gives you a sense of the character, but it doesn't go, here's what they look like. It lets you build up that idea. And the way they're written, you build up a really vivid idea of who's talking. One thing that, as I was reading it, I did think about was, is she going to give a voice to Julian? Because I thought that would be a really brave thing to do, and it would give us a very different point of view, give us the school bullies point of view, get underneath the skin of why he's doing this. And as I got nearer the end, I realised that wasn't going to happen. And initially, I thought it might have been a braver book if she'd included that. But then I thought, well, does his voice really have a place in the story? And I did a bit of research, and, well, I've done the extra credit assignment, actually, because I've read the follow-up. Well, I say follow-up, it's kind of a companion piece. It's called Oggy and Me, and it's from the point of view of 3 other minor characters in the story who didn't get a voice in Wonder. And they were specifically not given a voice in Wonder because R J Palacio wrote with a specific set of rules that said if they didn't directly impact on Oggy, if it didn't move the story forward, then it had no place in it. And she totally convinced me in the introduction to that book. I wrote down this quote that justified why she didn't put Julian's chapter in and why she wrote it separately. She just written, even as I was writing Wonder, I knew that Julian had a story to tell. I also knew that his story of bullying, or why he bullies, was of little consequence to Oggy and had no impact on the storyline, and therefore didn't belong in Wonder. And this is the key sentence that got me. She put, it's not for the victims of bullying to find compassion for their tormentors. And that's why it's not in there. And I think that made me think, well, of course, it would have detracted from it. It would have felt wrong. It would have felt like it would have stuck out like a sore thumb. Whereas if you read it separately, it's very powerful. I suggest if you get hold of a copy of that and read it, it gives you more on Julian, and it doesn't necessarily make it, well, it doesn't forgive what he does at all, but it gives you some understanding of where he comes from. And R J Palacio has said that she thinks of them all as her children, and so she tries to show understanding to all the characters. And so Julian, he drops out quite a bit in the later chapters of the book, doesn't he? And that chapter explains what happened and why he's missing from it. So it's a brilliantly written supplement to the novel.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was going to be one of my questions sort of later on. I was going to say, are you going to move on to this? I mean, Rachel, you must do. I'm definitely going to, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Because there's even more. There's a few other extra ones as well that have come out since. So this world is obviously growing for her, and she's exploring other things about being a child and other things that you have to, try and understand, and always with this undercurrent of kindness and tolerance and patience and things, which is really important.
And also a book aimed at 4+, an illustrated book called We Are All Wonders, which is getting this message that's needed. Well, early on, and I think again as we spoke about in the introduction, this is. I think more important for adults than children. Children just do this anyway, naturally. They just treat each other equally. It's only when prejudice is put on them later in life that, that they start to develop their prejudice more. But there we go. That's a perfect way, because the 4-5-year-old age group, maybe even 3-year-old age group, that are getting read to by their parents at night, and with the illustrated books, usually go for the shortest one. But let's get this over with. Just get them to bed. Sorry, a bit of my home life. Anyway, so this will then go on to the parents that are reading that, and and the message that goes there. I mean, I know that the message of Herbie Monkey, which is one of our illustrated books at home, where Herbie Monkey's dropping nuts on Grandpa's big bottom. That message has stuck with me.
Don't drop nuts on Grandpa's bottom.
Initially he wasn't very happy about it, but they had a big cuddle at the end, so it was all
about the cuddles.
It was all fine. Yeah, it was all fine.
So, what's the message?
Don't worry about dropping nuts. Have a cuddle.
Exactly. I think we've all learned something. And the expansive characters in this book. Sorry, I'm dragging us back here. Now, come on, honestly, you two, you lead us down some. Just go off on any tangents. I'm going to draw you back in here. One of the other great character, I think, is Summer. Can't be overlooked, can't be missed. And just her endearing positivity. Now, there was a point where Augie thought that Summer had either done or said something about her, or I think he misunderstood something she'd said, or I can't remember the specifics of it, I'm paraphrasing. And I thought, oh no, don't go down this, in my head I was just, no. But Summer straight away puts him right and says, no, don't do that. I'm never going to do that. Stop doing that.
Yeah.
Okay,
she's wonderful.
Good, yeah,
she's
fantastic.
Just loves Summer. It's because he thought that Mr. Tushman had also spoken to her to get her to be friends with him. But it came from, she was genuine from the start, and she was thinking, no, I'm not having that.
Yeah, my choice to sit here.
Absolutely.
This is what I'm doing. Yeah,
she's wonderful.
Yeah, R J Palacio said that Summer is who she wishes she had been like, and still wishes and wants to be and tries to be like. She says that the character she most identifies in as much as she was like at school is Charlotte, who's the one who's nice to Oggy, but not necessarily kind. And she said that Charlotte kind of outlines the difference between just being nice to someone and going that extra step to be kind.
And then I think that's good, because that steers us into this point now that I was talking about, where done the wrong way, I hate this kind of thing where you've got a setup. But I understand you need drama in a drama, right? I do understand that. But the point where Oggy gets dressed up in the different costume, and he overhears Jack Wills talking to Julian, whatever, not saying some very nice things. Now, I mean, I can't remember specifics of doing that, but I do remember thinking at the time, well, that's human. It's not. I didn't think it was particularly unforgivable or forgivable, but I don't know, understandable, because Jack himself is trying to fit in and just be, I'm pretty sure I've behaved as badly as that when I was that age, and probably, if I'm being honest, as more of an adult.
Yeah, I think the sort of it's not really proper betrayal from Jack, because, as you say, he's doing his best to fit in as well. He doesn't know that Augie's there, and he definitely doesn't feel that way. But he's just kind of saying it to, be big and, fit in with these people. And we all make mistakes. But I know it hurts Augie terribly. And it hurt me when I heard him saying that as well. But what was lovely about it is it didn't go on too long, because that could have been the whole of the rest of the book.
Yeah.
With him not being friends and blah, but they came together quite quickly. Yeah. And actually kids do that. Kids don't hold grudges for the whole of their school life. They because they're really close knit, and as soon as let's just sort this out, and thank goodness someone was just like, it's a bleeding scream. So, yeah, and then so they sorted it out.
But also the fact that it took a while to sink in, because that's a boy thing. That completely, that'd be me.
But Jack's reaction when it does is fantastic. Because have you ever? I've certainly done that. I've sent a text message to someone referring to someone else in the text message, and then put it down and then thought, did I just send that to the person I was talking about? And then when you find out that you didn't, you're so relieved. But then you think, well, should I have really put what I put about that person if that was the reaction I had of imagining them knowing about it? So I could totally understand Jack. And I was really glad that after that happened with Jack, quite quickly we got Jack's narrative voice come in, and he explained, because he went through quite a transformation, didn't he? He decided to go and be one of Oggy's welcoming buddies because he saw his little brother's reaction to him and the horrible things that his brother, who he knew was a nice person, would say. And he thought, if someone nice can say those things, then we need to, they need people like me to step up and say no.
There's incredible emotional maturity there, really incredible. And it really stood him out as being somebody quite special.
Yeah.
And I was disappointed in what he said with Julian, but it was also understandable. I forgave him really quickly.
Yeah.
And it did mark a turning point for him insofar as, no, actually, I'm willing to fight for this. This friendship's really important. This isn't just a throwaway thing. Augie's really funny and smart, and I love spending time with him. Why am I betraying him with these awful people that I don't even like?
Yeah.
And so he almost went completely the other way, because when the war started, he was absolutely with Summer and Augie.
Yeah.
And he didn't care how many people were on the other side. He knew where he stood then. He'd been challenged. He'd fallen a little bit on the hurdle, but then he'd got up and he'd gone to where was right and where was kind. And that was it for him then. He was absolutely solid.
I'm just sat here and I'm thinking about so much that we can talk about, but No, I think we should move it through. I'm trying my best just to skip over Daisy passing away, and because I just don't want to think about this.
No.
And but it was dealt with very well and subtly. And oh god, she's a good writer, isn't she?
Yes.
And so we move on to moving into the sort of what is a very long finale. I think. I mean, it feels like a finale all the way it's leading up to it. And that's his time away. And I felt a certain relief when he left his toy behind for his mum, as well as being upset by it, as well as being cheered by it. And but also the relief that he felt when Julian wasn't going. It just meant he felt like he could be himself.
I mean, I was similarly relieved when I knew Julian wasn't going. But then you do think about, hang on a minute, you're going away from everybody that knows you and into a place where people don't know you. So you may have got rid of that Julian, but there could be other Julians ready to get you. And actually there were. And so I was really worried for him. But by that point, we had the really solid group that you kind of, it's okay. He's going with Jack and Summer, and there was a few others that were coming up, because the war by then had neutralised, hadn't it? It got where most people either didn't care about it or they were totally on their side. Mm-hmm. I think by this point, Julian was on his own in the war. So I think it was well and truly won. And so I felt reassured that he was with the right people.
That's true. There were still a few to win over, though. There's still a few to win over. Now, there was a character there, and again, this is where the writing kicked in for me, is that there was a character in there called Amos, and his name cropped up a few times throughout the story. And for some reason, I thought, yeah, he's all right. And he turned out to be all right.
Yes,
he did. Yeah.
Right. So before we get to the big Star Wars ending, let's talk about the film. There's a film with this not far from release as we make this program, and when you see the names Julia Roberts, you go, sure. Owen Wilson, you think, well, he's capable of good things, but then we see spoiler favourite, and I'm looking at Rachael now in this room, Jacob Tremblay.
Yay!
And you think, well, I mean, this is the key part, the key role. Nothing can go wrong, can it?
Not with him. He'll do it. I do have a slight issue because I've seen photographs. The makeup, while reasonable, is far too subtle for me. Far too subtle. It's like if you're going to do something about overcoming, a really quite dramatic facial difference, don't be afraid to show it then.
Yeah,
I absolutely agree.
Don't be afraid to show it.
It feels like they've talked about it and said, will audiences look at something extreme for that long? And the point is that they will. And if the film's written as well as the book, they will get used to it as it goes along.
Absolutely, just trust them.
And it's not to say that kids with less severe facial differences have any easier time, but it does feel like it was done for the wrong reasons to me.
I totally agree. I mean, there is a good description of what Augie looks like, and that photograph is not it. There's some fantastic makeup artists out there. It's been very easy to have done a really good depiction of Treacher-Collins syndrome, and they didn't do it. To me, they didn't do it, and that sort of belittles what children can actually deal with. Children can go to the cinema and watch that and feel as they should feel when reading the book. They will, as Jack says, get used to his face, and let them do that. Let them have a chance, because they'll now think that's what Treacher-Collins syndrome looks like, and it doesn't. I mean, sort of milder versions, it is a spectrum, so milder versions may look like that, but that's not what Augie looks like. It's a disservice to Augie. And to all those children that say, I am Augie Pullman, it's a disservice to them. So I do have an issue with that. And I have an issue with the fact that Julia Roberts is playing a supposed Brazilian. The mum is Brazilian, and all of a sudden it's Julia Roberts. So I have a slight issue with that as well.
It's going to be interesting. I mean, I think they've overlooked someone who could play the dad, and I think that could have been me. But anyway, if I keep pitching these in spoilers, someone's going to catch it one day. Now, when novels like Wonder are adapted into films, publishers frequently attempt to cash in on this renewed interest by republishing the book with a new, redesigned cover, prominently featuring the stars of the movie, perhaps in the hope of some of that Hollywood magic rubbing off and flogging a few extra copies. Rachael is decidedly not a fan of this practice. Any publishers listening might want to take cover now.
I have to confess, I struggled to decide on a topic for this show's feature. Wonder is packed full of potential focal points, all worthy and important. But then, I went to buy a replacement copy of the book, having lost the original to a very excitable friend who borrowed it, then dropped it in the bath. And I was frustrated to discover that the only version available had a movie cover. Ugh, a movie cover. And so the topic of this feature became immediately apparent. Movie book covers, are they really necessary?
Can't judge a book by looking at the cover.
The movie cover for Wonder is actually not too bad. It's kept the same blue of the original and it's sparse, simply the word wonder and then a cutout of the figure of Augie with his helmet on, which forms the O in wonder. I actually like the fact that the cover reveals nothing more about the content than the original did. However, they've done something unforgivable inside, a centre section of photographs from the film. Why? Anyone new to the book who hasn't seen the film and may never want to has been denied the chance of forming their own pictures of the characters in their minds. This is one of the crucial things that a movie book cover often does, and one of the main reasons I'll always choose the original over the movie version. It dictates the look of the characters from the start. Before you've even opened the cover, you're being told what they look like. The original cover for The Great Gatsby is a classic, a striking gouache painting by a Spanish artist called Francis Cugat, and one of the most memorable covers ever. When the most recent film adaptation came out in 2013, an inevitable movie cover accompanied it, and it was dire. All the main characters were shown with a typical Art Deco frame, incredibly unimaginative and completely uninspiring. Honestly, why bother? It's not like the book needed the extra sales. Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell got a similar treatment when the film came out in 2012. If any book deserves a reader without any preconceptions, it's this one. However, just as with The Great Gatsby, the film cover is all about the principal characters, including the biggest star in the cast, Tom Hanks. While I know that films often need people to read the source material, do movie covers really make the difference between them buying it or not? Another problem with movie covers, honestly I have lots of them, is that they age badly. These character-heavy movie still versions place them very definitely in a particular era of film. The age of the actors, the quality of the photography, etc. A truly strong book cover is timeless. The original Hobbit cover is a great example of this. It was actually designed by Tolkien himself in 1937, and it shocks me that there have been so many different versions since, as surely that fact alone should make it definitive. Despite some truly atrocious cover designs for The Hobbit over the years, the film version still annoys me the most, as it's just lazy. The back of Bilbo as he walks out the door of his hobbit hole. Groundbreaking, right? And I ask again, was there really any need for a film cover for one of the most famous books of all time that has never struggled to sell? Okay, now I come to my final justification for the eradication of all movie covers. They can potentially give too much away and in some cases destroy the meaning of the book entirely. I give you Exhibit A, The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas by John Boyne. The original cover was deliberately ambiguous, purely blue and white stripes, and the title. Even the blurb was vague and gave no real indication of the story inside. This was purposeful. It was the author's intention that children go to the book without any preformed ideas and with a complete innocence of the horrors of the Second World War. As it's still possible that some listeners may not have read this book or seen the film, I'm going to keep this as vague as I can, but needless to say, if you happen upon the film cover, that mystery is immediately eradicated. The slow reveal of the true story that is so masterfully done in the writing is defunct. In this case, I can genuinely say that using a film cover has ruined the whole concept. I found an article online about movie covers for books that don't suck. It was meant to be in defence of some movie tie-ins, but they made a big mistake, which meant the entire article was rendered moot. One of their examples was the film cover for Roald Dahl's BFG. This, they decided, was a strong cover. Really? When you have an iconic cover by the undisputed king of Dahl illustrators, Quentin Blake, you can't improve on that. Anything other than that is just simply wrong. So, have I convinced you? Maybe you were never a fan of movie covers either, but if you were, I hope I've encouraged you to look out for the original covers in future. They'll endure far better on your bookshelves, and may even add to the whole experience of discovering a new story. Never judge a book by its cover. Unless it's a movie tie-in, then go right ahead.
Thanks for that, Rachel. Now, I am full of props in this episode, aren't I? So when we announced that Johnny was up for the award, we had a party popper left over from Halloween. I brought my mobile phone out. My cell phone
mobile?
out, my mobile phone.
What is going on with that?
And on my way out here today, I bought this book.
Ah, the original cover.
The original cover now.
I think that isn't this original cover quite iconic already? Because
yeah, totally.
I'd never heard of Wonder when you suggested it, but when I saw that, I was like, it's that book. So I
The one with the
definitely
eye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. And what's going to happen here is that I'm probably not going to read that, but I'm going to leave it around the house. Because I think if we know anything, it's the fact that I'm not going to go home and tomorrow say, right, read this, kids.
Because
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And why would they? But if I leave it around the house, and I don't know, maybe sometimes when some screens get taken off them, they might pick up a book and they might start to read. And yes, this is what you've done to me. You've turned me into a reader again.
Hey!
That Springsteen book will get finished. Right, so as we get to the ending, and I called it the Star Wars ending earlier because it is Cheeseville, isn't it?
Yeah, it is quite cheesy.
We've landed in some Wensleydale grommet here.
And I think that's only going to be worse in the film.
Oh, my
it's
goodness,
one of my least favourite cliches in films is an ending where everyone claps.
Yeah.
But even as it is cheesy, I did still smile reading it, and I was happy that it needs to end that way, because it was one of the reasons that R J Palacio said she introduced all these other voices was that Argy doesn't realise how much of an impact he has on other people's lives. And she said she thought it would be false to bring that in and make him realise that. So you see it through other people's eyes, see what impact he's having on them, but he's not necessarily aware of it. And this is the moment, I think, when he does become aware of it. And it is a plausible situation where it could happen. So as an ending, I was happy with it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, there is an element of cheesy about it. Like, it's all a bit neat and tidy, but he deserves it. And he's been through a lot, and we've seen all the various, as you say, various points of view. It makes sense with those points of view. You know, it's not contrived. It's in cahoots with that, so that's fine. Yeah, it ties it up with a bow, but you know, this is a children's book, and we've got to show that there's hope, that there's good things. You know, you can't have it at the end where he gets punched in the face or something. For God's sake, this is a children's book. You know, and we're supposed to be inspiring and saying, you know, it's okay to be yourself, and yeah. So you've got to have a good ending, otherwise, you know, what are you doing it for? Exactly. So yeah, it's good.
Well, we're about to wrap things up now. Normally at this point, I would offer you a rating, but we would have missed the point completely if we had a rating at the end of this episode. And therefore, spoiler, as it's a dictatorship, not a democracy, I'm stating now that we're going to be kinder than necessary and not rate Wonder. So all that remains is to thank you for listening. As always, it's great that so many do now as well. We're hitting huge numbers here, and it makes us all immensely proud. If you're listening for the first time, you're very, very welcome. Join in the rest. Have a look at the back catalogue and recommend us to a friend. We always appreciate that. We don't ask for anything more than that. Thanks to Johnny, our uber-talented award-nominated producer. Rachel, Andy, a pleasure as always, and we'll leave you with the aforementioned genial Andy Golding.
The next time you feel tempted to call someone funny looking, just take some time to think about the bodies we're all stuck in. Though we've concocted notions of a beauteous ideal, the human race, in every case, looks pretty damn surreal. Check out those bulbous eyeballs as they dart from place to place, that giant growth with punctures in the middle of your face, those lips that purse and pucker like the rear end of a camel, concealing exposed bits of bone with a top coat of enamel. It's only through necessity we call these normal features, for human beings are really quite the ugliest of creatures, and yet we fool our brains into believing we look great. We have to buy into the lie if we're to procreate. But given the bizarreness of the shells in which we're housed, it's a wonder we stop laughing long enough to get aroused.
Every day is so wonderful, and suddenly it's hard to breathe. And now and then,
You've been listening to Spoiler, hosted by me, Paul Tyler, with Andy Goulding and Rachel Burnett. Our theme music was composed by Ron Butcher, and you also heard excerpts from the Wonder audiobook, published by Random House.
beautiful, no matter what they say. Words won't bring me down.
If you've enjoyed the show, please do tell your friends about us, share links to our show, or rate us and write a nice review on iTunes. 5 stars, please. Anything less is not worthwhile. If you could contact us, you can email hello@spoilerpodcast.co.uk, find us on Twitter or Facebook, or go to our website, spoilerpodcast.co.uk.
So don't you bring me down today.
Next time on Spoiler, we're taking a look at Quentin Tarantino's 2012 western, Django Unchained.
How do you like the bounty hunting business? Kill white folks and they pay you for it? What's not to like?
Spoiler is produced by Johnny Hoare and is a Joe Schmo production. The show was recorded at the studios of Siren Radio in the heart of the beautiful cathedral city of Lincoln.
Cool beans.
So don't you bring me down today.